So we all know Saturn's a kind of funny looking planet with all those rings around it, but it's not the only planet that has rings. Earth doesn't have rings, we know that for sure. But we know Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus has rings right around it, and they're all pretty funny looking. But by far, Saturn is the biggest and the brightest and the most craziest looking rings you've ever seen, well, in our solar system. So almost 400 years ago, an astronomer named Galileo was the first person to actually look and see Saturn's rings through a telescope. So ever since he spotted them in 1610, scientists have been trying to figure out what they are, what they're made of, and why they're there. So one thing we know for sure is that Saturn's rings are made up of mostly ice and rock. I'm not going to drop that. And we do know that the sizes of ice and rock vary greatly in size. Some are as tiny as a grain of sand, some are the size of this rock, and some are the size of this giant house. Well, not this giant house, but a giant house. But scientists still aren't sure exactly when or how the rings were actually formed around Saturn. One thing they think is that the rings might have something to do with the many moons that surround Saturn. So we all know that Earth has one moon. We see it every single night. But Saturn, on the other hand, has about 60 moons surrounding it. Asteroids and meteoroids sometimes crash into these moons, breaking them apart into thousands and thousands of pieces that ultimately make up these rings. And of course, the rings might also be formed from when Saturn was originally formed, just pieces of stuff and rock that were originally around the planet. So from far away, you can tell that Saturn has at least 7 rings around it, and each one of those rings is named after a letter in the alphabet. At least each one of the large rings is named after a letter in the alphabet. And these rings that are named were named in order of that they were discovered. So of course the first ring that was discovered is named the A ring, but it's not necessarily the closest to the planet or the furthest away. So some of these rings are really, really close together, and some of them are so far apart you can actually tell by looking at it through a telescope. It's really cool that these rings don't actually stand still around the planet. They're actually circling the planet or orbiting the planet like a moon would. A closer look at the planet shows that each one of the rings is actually made up of many, many, many smaller individual rings to make this one massive looking cool ring that you see through a telescope or in cool pictures that we see online. So we know Saturn is much, much, much larger than Earth. You can actually fit 700 Earth-sized planets inside of Saturn. And that ultimately makes Saturn's rings thousands upon thousands of miles wide. And that means that if there were cars in space, it would take them more than a week to drive across some of Saturn's rings. Although the rings are a little bit thin, ranging from about 30 feet to 300 feet thick. Now the best look we've had at Saturn and its rings was the Cassini spacecraft. Launched on October 15th, 1997, Cassini's mission to explore Saturn ended on September 15th, 2017, with a deliberate plunge into Saturn's atmosphere. The spacecraft transmitted data from launch until the point that it actually impacted the planet or disintegrated somewhere in the atmosphere. Now it's time for some Saturn rapid fire. Saturn is the 5th brightest object in our solar system. Saturn's been known to humans for thousands of years because you can just look up and see it. It is named after the Roman god Saturnus and the Greek god Cronus. Here's one for you flat earthers. Saturn is actually the flattest planet we have in our solar system. Saturn orbits the sun every 29.4 Earth years. Saturn has oval-shaped storms similar to Jupiter. The region at its north pole has a hexagonal-shaped cloud system. It looks amazing. Saturn is made up of mostly hydrogen. Of course, what we know, Saturn has the most extensive and amazing-looking rings in our whole solar system. Saturn has some amazing moons around it too, like Titan. It's got over 150 little moons or moonlets or whatever you want to call it, but it's got a lot and they're really cool. As of today, 4 spacecraft have actually visited Saturn, one of them crashing right into it when it was finished. So that's about it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed our little talk about Saturn and its rings. They're so amazing, and I might joke that, Saturn's not the only planet with rings, but it's true. There's so many other planets that do have rings. Uranus has some big rings. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. If you did, if you didn't, whatever, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. If you want to see more like this, let me know. Leave a like. Subscribe if you think I've earned it. Support us on Patreon. That's amazing. Thank you so much to our first patrons. That's really helpful. That really helps us make more videos and make them better. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time on Space Course.